This is Hannibal from the Hannibal TV.com with a daily combat sports news update for you. Amanda Nunes retained her women's featherweight title in UFC action tonight over Felicia Spencer. It was a 5th round decision. I'm actually surprised it went all 5 rounds. We all might remember that Nunes had a lot of knockouts, so I'm surprised, but good for Felicia Spencer. I believe she's from Montreal, but she trains out of Orlando now. In other action, there was 3 bantamweight men's fights. There was others, but these, as I have tomato juice on my mouth, I just drank tomato juice and egg whites before I did this. Piper didn't do her job licking it off. Sean O'Malley defeated Eddie Winland by knockout at 154 of round 1. Joe Rogan said that was the greatest walkaway knockout he ever saw. Aljamain Sterling, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, defeated Corey Sandhagen by submission. Now, I know I can't pronounce this guy's name very well, but the submission was fairly impressive. It was like a rear naked choke, and it rendered Corey unconscious. And another Corey Garbrandt defeated Rafael Asunkeo by round 2 knockout. This was another good knockout. Very good striking skills by those guys. I watched it on Twitter, by the way, the highlights. I am on Twitter at Devon Hannibal and at the Hannibal TV. I didn't actually order the pay-per-view. In wrestling news, Smackdown did a 0.55 rating last night. The theme of Smackdown, and I watched some of this, it was like a theme where Miz and Morrison were pranking Braun Strowman throughout the whole show. Again, WWE trying to use comedy to build up a match. I guess there's an upcoming match between Braun Strowman versus Miz and Morrison. I don't know why they couldn't have just had Strowman against Morrison. Morrison is a great talent and developed a serious feud there rather than making this a big joke. Like WWE seems to like to make everything a big joke. Apparently related to the talent in WWE that got released in April. By the way, Luke Gallows, I spoke to today. He is going to do a shoot interview with me once his no compete clause runs out. I have stated many times that Luke Gallows, in my opinion, is the only real top talent that they shouldn't have let go out of those releases. But I'll get Gallows' version of that. But there's a lot of people that feel bad that those 20 or so talent were released during the lockdown. They're still paid until mid-July. It's not like they were released in the middle of this lockdown and aren't getting paid. There's a 3-month no-compete clause where they're still paid. So many of us aren't getting any money from their regular jobs during the lockdown. At least those guys got paid, and I understand many parts of the U.S. are opening back up, some parts of Canada. Here where I am in Canada, for some reason they're letting thousands of people protest, but we're still on lockdown. My gym's still not open. I'm going to use my punching bag later tonight. I might go out and run a little bit as well, but I've been running a bunch of days in a row, and my legs are absolutely shredded right now. They're in a lot of pain. So not a huge news day. That's the main news of the day. I'll answer a couple of your questions. The Pope of Sports and Entertainment says it was domination for the Nunes fight. I did watch the clips of the fight, and it did look like she dominated the fight. But Spencer is tough, and it was still a good fight for her, I think, to go the distance with the featherweight champion. And Richard Mins even says Felicia was as tough as nails. And from all reports, I also heard that. Robert Spartany says that also agrees Felicia was tough. I guess Nunes put the belt on Felicia after as a sign of respect, according to the Pope of Sports and Entertainment. Chris Thomas says AEW is better than WWE. I'll be honest, I think I'm the most neutral wrestling reporter out there. As far as WWE and AEW goes, I don't like either of them. Sam Lentz says MLW got mad at me for saying Adam Cole wasn't a draw. They should hire Hannibal instead. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm 100 times better draw than that kid could ever be, but I'm doing well at this, and I'm happy with this. But why am I missing something? Isn't Adam Cole in NXT? I never heard that he could have been in MLW. I don't know. I don't watch MLW that closely, but last I checked, Adam Cole was the NXT champion, and he looks, as I've said many times, like a ninth grader that doesn't work out. Wrestling needs characters. They need people that can make fans believe. And I'm not a fan of that guy from what I've seen of him. Albert Gallinosa says Bob Backlund is the most underrated champion in wrestling history. I couldn't tell you because I don't think I was even born when he was champion. So I wasn't around to experience it. I can tell you, though, from being around him for 2 or 3 days back in, I think it was 2016 at the Iowa Hall of Fame, he seems in real life a lot like his character in later years in the WWE, as if he's going to snap at any minute. Ed the Maniac says he didn't watch Smackdown as he already knew it'd be the drizzling shits. I think the best part of Smackdown is the female wrestler that I used for the screenshot of this. I forget what her name was, but I watched the highlights, and she has a great physique. And she did a pretty good moonsault. What are my thoughts on Eric Rowan? I haven't seen much of him. I couldn't give you my thoughts on him. He's a big guy, has a good look to him. That's the extent of what my thoughts could be. What are my thoughts on Dave Meltzer at the Maniac? Is he hurting the wrestling business? I don't think he's hurting the wrestling business, no. I think he's biased towards AEW. I think he really pushes his political views on people. But he does have a lot of inside information that others don't get. So I follow his news for that reason. But I take a lot of the things he says with a grain of salt. As far as my personal interactions with him, he did report some false news on me before. He actually reported before, like this dweeb. I'm not even going to mention his name, but he's a French reporter. They both reported that I shot on Tommy Dreamer, which, as I've said on here, was a work. So for the people that say that Dave Meltzer and the smart marks of the world can't be worked, well, yes, they can. And now WWE is even doing custom angles for the smart marks, like this Drake Maverick angle that they recently did with him crying over allegedly getting fired, and it appears it was all a big angle to bring more attention to this NXT tournament. And this Nia Jax angle they're doing with the stairs and the blade job, specifically for the smart marks, because let's face it, the overall vast majority of people still watching wrestling are the smart marks, because they've turned off the majority of the mainstream audience. Have I ever met The Rock? The People's Wrestling Channel asked me. No, I really hope to meet him. I've met and interviewed. Actually, technically, I have. I have met him when I was a kid, but not as a reporter. He told me to fuck off when I asked for his autograph when I was in grade 9 at a wrestling event in Hull, Quebec, that was shortly after his debut at Survivor Series 96. But I have interviewed his mother and father, and I think The Rock would be on my list of interviews I'd like to get before I die. King Merc says shrimp nipples, whatever that means. Matt R., how did Meltzer become a judge at one of the early UFCs? I don't know. I guess they wanted publicity. I don't know. But I think they found that it was a conflict because he's also a reporter, so he wasn't a judge again, from what I understand. I heard Meltzer talk about it before, but I don't remember the specifics. Dan Severn was actually a referee at one of the early UFCs too, if you can believe that. The Sugar Bear 585 says, I haven't watched WWE in about a year, and they've lost me again. Mad Dog Malone, do I remember the Josh Matthews, Tim White suicide angle? Only vaguely, now that you bring it up, but it was after the point in time that I stopped watching wrestling. I only really vaguely remember it being mentioned in the news. Sam Lentz says the problem with wrestling is bad promoters. Wrestlers do what they pay to do. Well, wrestlers could also get over better. Wrestlers could get themselves over better. They have Drew McDonald or whatever the hell his name is. I've watched a few interviews with him, and he's completely breaks kayfabe every time he does an interview. Like, for instance, he doesn't say that when he's talking about wanting to wrestle AJ Styles, he says, I'd really like to work with AJ Styles. I think we could do something special together and so forth. I'd like to work with The Undertaker. I think we could do something special together again. He doesn't try and build it up in an angle. It's like, I'd like to work. We could make a cool storyline, put a cool match. He doesn't like create any heat. And who else? Nick Aldis. It was in the news yesterday. He says he'd really like to work with Joe Henning, who was recently released, Kurt Henning's son, because they know each other from training, and they're friends, and they could have a good match together. It's like, what the fuck is this? Why do I want to watch people that want to work together? I want to see why do I want to watch UFC? Because they build angles. There's heat going into fights, and yeah, it's way more interesting than wrestling, to be honest with you. Long Duck Dong tipped me $5. Thank you, Long Duck Dong. I don't smile enough. What gives? Am I not a happy person? I want you to not take yourself out of this life in a bad way. And you know what I mean? I don't know what you mean, man. If there's one thing I always hated when I was a bouncer, was the girls, particularly the fat ones, that would go up to me and be like, smile. Maybe some of us, and I appreciate your tip, but honestly, don't tip me again if you're going to ask me that's stupid crap, because just because someone doesn't smile doesn't mean they're not a happy person, okay? And you know what? Fuck off. I'm going to just end it at that.